And now, Cara Gormally, our fabulous host today, is a cartoonist, researcher, and professor at Gallaudet University. Their debut graphic memoir, Everything is Fine, I'll Just Work Harder, is released now from Street Noise Books. And I think we'll have a link for that as well in the chat. Kara is fascinated by questions about belonging, and their interdisciplinary research focuses on questions related to making science relevant and accessible to increase students' belonging in STEM. A DC metro area resident, Kara is an avid morning person, loves nerdy research, deep dives, and has more questions than answers, which I love that. And you can learn more about Kara's work, of course, now through their talk and through caragormally.com. But I'll leave the rest to you. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, MK. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. I am going to go ahead and share a few slides. I want to share a little bit about my book, and then we'll do some drawing together. So what we're going to kind of do together is do a little bit of exploring our shame stories with tenderness. I like to think of curiosity, compassion, and drawing as shame anecdotes. Um, and as Cynthia held up, this is my book, Everything is Fine, I'll Just Work Harder. So I don't know if anyone's seen this book. This is a book from, I believe it was published in the 80s. I came across it recently. It's called How a Book is Made, and it kind of delighted me. And I started to think about like, oh my gosh, I need to make my own version of how a book is made. And so here it is. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the making of my book. So here is my version. Um, I like books. I like the way a book feels. I like the way a book smells. I like to turn each page, read each word, look at the pictures.
Kara, the slides are not moving. I'm not sure if you want, we're just stuck in the first slide. I don't know if you changed the
Yeah.
slides.
Okay, let me try. Let me start. Let me share again. Can you all see? Are they moving now?
Yes.
Yes, now we're
Okay.
seeing slide 2.
Awesome. Okay. So, right, here's this book, How a Book is Made by Alaki, um, and that I thought was kind of delightful. And I was like, I need to make my own version of how my book was made. And so I'm going to share a little bit about that today in talking about my book. Thank you for, yeah, tell me if the slides fall down again. I like books. I like the way a book feels. I like the way a book smells. I like to turn each page, read each word, look at the pictures. Who made this book? I did, said the author, author artist. We did, said the editor, the publisher, the printer, and many others. They all did. Many people made this book, and this is how they did it. And I've got my cartoons of my publisher, Liz Francis, and my editor, Francesca Lynn, who are really integral parts of my process. So I wanted to share some background of how I made this book. I'd been drawing comics for a few years, mostly for myself as diary comics, especially through the process of doing IVF to have a baby. And then I had this really transformative experience in therapy. And that was kind of after my life as I knew it, kind of fell apart. I was an overworked academic. I'm still an academic. I try not to be an overworked one now. Um, and after this, I felt really compelled to tell this story, which became my book. And at the time, I was not sure if it was going to become a book, or a published book at least, but I knew that I needed to try and that it felt really important to me to do that work. And my story is really about unpacking shame. And shame is such a universal experience. We all experience it, and some of us experience it even more because shame is often related to judgment about what is normal, whatever normal means. And shame makes us feel less than, like we're not normal, that we can't be ourselves, and that we don't belong. And so, as a result of this journey in therapy, reading extensively about shame, I've become nerdily fascinated by shame. Um, Research and comic making are kind of like, I describe them as soft things of joy. Um, and after unpacking lots of shame, most of it which was unjustified, like homophobia, it's just wild to see it everywhere. And so my curiosity about it makes me see how universal it is, unfortunately. And it sparks a lot of self-compassion and compassion for other people. And so if you're interested in more, I've made a bunch of comics about the evolution of shame, a lot of comics about the psychology of shame, and they're on my Substack. So I wanted to share about my process. This book, I started with thumbnails. They were my first attempt at trying to tell my story. I made my thumbnails both on paper, and then as I worked increasingly only digitally, I would make them digitally. And I think the best thing, as many of you probably know from making your own thumbnails, about thumbnails is that they're just not precious at all. Like there's so much freedom in making them. There's no need to be perfect or precious. It's just getting something on the page and trying to get some words and an idea. And once I get those down, then somehow I can come back and interpret that and use that at a later date to expand on. And so I made my thumbnails on index cards, which I want to give credit to Beth Tremblay for introducing me to that concept of using index cards. It's so great. It really helped me to organize pages, to move things around easily, and again, kept it from me getting too attached to pages before they weren't, when they were just kind of just beginnings of ideas. And it's also kind of wild, actually. Even when I look at it right now, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see little bits of my book, how that came out of these, which is, it's really cool to see the different, like look back at time now at the different stages. Also because I'm a big nerd and because my book is both memoir and integrates research. So it's got all these strands of kind of nonfiction in there. I ended up enjoying all of these deep dives into literature about nervous systems and trauma therapy. And so for me, that looked like a lot of Google Scholar to find papers, NIH, and has also a huge repository of papers. And so I would take a lot of notes to try to capture what was piquing my curiosity and interest and jot down questions. And then when I felt kind of satiated with that information, then I knew I was ready to craft that into my narrative. I do everything, all my final work ended up in Procreate, where I would ink and color. And gradually I've moved over to Procreate to do basically everything, even my thumbnails. I ended up just finding the process, it made the process so easy. Uh, and there is me in 2023 with a lot of the paper, original paper. And the other wild part of that is that it's so giant and the book itself is very slim. So in some ways, I feel like I wrote this book probably 3 or 4 or 5 times to get it right. And I can't talk about the process without like noting how much like how much I've really like learned from being in the process, and that really I think the process is the point in some way. It's actually really for me less about the ultimate outcome, about the published book, and more about the making that was so wild and profound. And I think especially because I was writing a book about a journey to heal from trauma, that process, like trusting that process, was really hard sometimes. And I literally felt very clenched sometimes of like finding it so hard to be in that process. But the more that I really allow myself to trust it, um, and to kind of be held in that process, the more that it actually moves along. And then I find lots of joy in it. I also think that the process and the making is such an emotional journey, not just, like a timeline of like, oh, I've got to get this done in order to be on schedule with deadlines, ultimately for book production. But it was just such an emotional journey of um, in many ways very isolating to like to realize like, oh, this is my work, that I've the only person who's going to make this book is me. And then simultaneously, such a community supported effort. I could not have done this without Sequential Artist Workshop. I could not have done this without my critique group. But I feel like fully certain that I can say I experienced a pretty full range of emotions related to this book. And I've had a lot of delight recently when I see my book in bookstores, which is just wild. And here it is. So today, I should also say that as a result of doing this work personally in therapy, in making this book, I am now back in school doing an MSW with the hopes of becoming a therapist. It's just been like a profound experience, and I want to witness other people's processes too. So I wanted us to offer a little bit of like orienting, which is a somatic experiencing kind of practice that I find to be like quite lovely, before we start to draw. I wanted us to take a few minutes to maybe settle into our practice because we're human animals arriving here together. And so I would invite you to kind of breathe and look around, notice your surroundings, notice your body. How do you feel? What are you bringing with you today? And as you take a few moments to look around your space, and I'm going to do that too, you might want to notice some things that maybe feel grounding or bring you some joy when you look at them. Maybe it's a plant. Maybe it's trees out your window. Maybe it's some art on your wall. Kind of a nice way to come back to our bodies and to get ready to be drawing. Linda Berry continues to be just such a force, and like a great source of inspiration of yeah, and also I think keeps giving me lots of permission to play. Uh, oh, and I'm seeing things in the chat. Let me catch up here before I read the Linda Berry. Okay. Yeah, so I love this quote. You don't need to have any artistic skill to do this. You just need to be brave and sincere. And so I want to kind of like urge us all to lean into this idea. I also want to say that we're all humans here together, and it's okay to feel nervous. We're having fun. And we're doing something that's a little vulnerable. And if you need a break, take a break. We're here together. Our goal is to be supportive and engaged. Everyone's style is unique and welcome, and styles evolve. I'm seeing that in my own work right now. And I also want to say that there are many ways to participate, and you don't have to share your work if you don't feel moved to. So I have a few activities that I would love for us to do together. My first activity is an activity for us to kind of just get like a little like loosened up and feel like things are a little bit flowing out of us because we're not. I find this activity to be helpful because it's not like an activity where you need to work hard at it. This is an activity, this is a Linda Berry activity. It comes from me to me from a class by Lenora Yankees that I took a couple years ago. And the activity is called Did, Saw, Felt. So what we'll do is we will take, let's see, about 3 minutes. You're going to want to take your page and you'll want to divide your page either physically by folding it or just kind of visually into thirds. And so the top third of your page, you're going to use for everything that you did. You could either think about everything you've done today so far, or you could think about yesterday, everything you did, but pick one day recently, and you're going to draw everything that you did for 3 minutes. Then we're going to take the next third of the page and we'll draw everything that we saw in 3 minutes. And then finally, the last bottom third, we'll draw everything that we felt. And I will set a timer for each of these. So I'm going to show you an example and then give you a little bit more instruction, and then we'll set the timer. So here's a couple of examples of ones that I've done. And I tend to like to use different colors for the did, saw, and felt. It helps me to feel like they're differentiated. And I just find this to be like such a helpful practice to start drawing because I'm not having to make anything any kind of way. I'm not having to come up with a narrative. I'm just moving things kind of like out of my brain through my hand. I want to challenge everybody to try to represent any feelings in the felt part using animals or objects rather than faces. So, for example, here on mine, you can see here's a particular frustration that for me, I visualized as kicking my feet, um, feeling exhausted and overwhelmed with this giant box on top of me, turning into a blob, my brain blowing off. So different kind of like visual metaphors for feelings. Okay, so we are going to take 3 minutes and move to the middle third of our page and draw everything that we saw. Okay, and now we are going to take the final third of our page and draw everything we felt. And I'll set my timer for 3 minutes again. So hopefully that helped us to start feeling a little kind of warmed up to drawing. We are going to do a second kind of multi part activity. And our first part of this activity is we're going to take 5 minutes to draw a soothing creature. So this could be imaginary, it can be real, but it should be something that brings you a feeling of sort of being seen and held. And so we'll take 5 minutes to draw yourself a creature. Right, and now we are going to do the second part of this activity, and that is we are going to think about a story that tugs at us to be told. And we're going to draw the tiny demons that keep you from telling your story and kind of listen to what the demons are saying and record that. If you want to make this using panels, you're welcome to. If you want to just kind of make it more free form, you're welcome to, whatever sort of speaks to you. And this can be something, big or even small. It can be something as small as like something that kind of made you worked up the other day, or where you felt mildly activated. I feel like that stuff often is almost like a thread that when you yank at it in a sweater, then it pulls out a bigger hole than you expected. Sometimes even those small things like get back to bigger things. So, yeah, so this is the second part of this activity. And we'll take, we'll take 5 minutes to do that. All right, so I know I want to be mindful that to have enough time to share at the end. So let's just take 3 minutes to do the final part of this activity, and that is considering how does your soothing creature respond to the tiny demons? What do the tiny demons need to hear? How can the soothing creature soothe them? So take 3 minutes and draw that.